Hello and welcome to today's roadcast. It's Thursday the 18th of June on the Pope's work schedule, and I'm once again back in the woods near Ambergate in Derbyshire. I thought it was a good place to choose for today's roadcast because, all being well, I won't be interrupted and it provides a fair bit of shade from the sun. And of course, shade and coolness do assist one's ability to think critically. And the ability to think critically is somewhat lacking right now, particularly in the so-called higher echelons of the control system. I'm talking about at the level where the Polly puppets operate, you know, with Mr. Punch, aka Sir Queer Starmer, and the rest of them, the other characters, who to varying degrees have got someone else's hand up their arse or have someone above them pulling their strings, directing their limbs at every turn. Once you keep that in mind, that there's no such thing as an independent politician, that they're all compromised to varying degrees, not the smallest aspects of which is the degree to which they've accepted the shekel, the degree to which they are sponsored, if you like, by those notorious friends of Israel and Zionist financiers, whom I have spoken about in previous roadcasts. I'm not going to focus particularly on those Jewish financiers and Zionists today, but all the while I would like you to bear in mind that they are invariably the ones who we may call the dark overlords, the ones who are operating in the background and in the shadows, and whose long bony fingers and overarching noses are never too far away from the main action. And action is exactly what it all is. If you're engaging in action, you're an actor. And the expression, all the world's a stage, is one that as I get older, and by the way, today is the 22,507th day of my sojourn here in this realm known as world. I sometimes think world should be spelled W-H-I-R-L-E-D, because it is a bit of a whirlpool, a bit of a maelstrom, and it's crazy. I mean, you could say right now that everywhere you turn, and I'd be inclined to believe you, at every turning point, every news event, every piece of information that is fed to us via the likes of the BBC propaganda service, Fox News, any Murdoch rag or media emporium, is spinning us a series of narratives that defy reason. And of course the opposite of reasonable is unreasonable. And so sometimes you will literally have your head spun out by the lack of reason that manifests in these narratives. Indeed, the accompanying essay to this afternoon's roadcast is about this very subject. It's about how reason has seemingly deserted the higher echelons of the control system, and, maybe not surprisingly for those who have been paying attention, the judiciary, Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service, have, as far as I'm concerned, for a long time been failing to apply reason and logic to their determinations. And if you go to my website and you see the section Road Justice, you'll see that I've documented several examples, several egregious and, you may say, crazy examples of this, where judges have ruled against plaintiffs in spite of the facts of the matter, at variance to the truth. And you may say, well, why would that be the case? Well, in the simplest of terms, the system will do all it can to protect and cover up and rescue its own kind. And if you are, for example, a knight of the realm, like Sir Queer Starmer is, you are indeed protected by the system whose interests you are representing. And so it came to pass that just this week, the trial of the 3 Ukrainians who were accused of firebombing, committing acts of arson against 3 of Keir Starmer's former properties came to a conclusion. The trial was held at the Old Bailey, and right from the very beginning it was shrouded in anomalies and strange circumstances. I mean, the allegations against the 3 men in and of themselves were very strange. Just to summarise, I think it was in April of 2025 that 3 properties of Sir Queer Starmer got firebombed, 2 houses and a car. And then it was announced that 3 men of Ukrainian nationality had been charged with arson. And if you look at it, it was quite serious. I mean, there was extensive damage to the porches of the 2 houses, and similarly to the car. So immediately, if you're able to think critically, you're thinking, well, what on earth were 3 Ukrainians doing, targeting the Prime Minister's property? And if that wasn't strange enough, it became apparent that the 3 of them had got profiles on what I understand to be a homosexual dating site called Grindr. And so immediately, as you'd expect, it's only natural, people begin to question just who they were, what they were doing, why it happened, and what, if any, were the connections between the 3 of them and Sir Keir Starmer. The fact that there was no coverage in the tabloid press also would be enough to ring certain alarm bells and get people thinking exactly what the true narrative of this bizarre story was. Some people, quite naturally, I would suggest, put out the idea that this was all as a result of Sir Queer Starmer not paying the 3 rent boys the agreed amount for their services. It's not unprecedented. Take for instance Keith Vaz. He was another who got caught using the services of rent boys in his flat at Dolphin Square. You've also got other notorious homosexuals, of which Peter Mandelson, Wes Street and certain others are members of what you could call, not unreasonably, a gay mafia. And then to add more conjecture and strangeness to the entirety of it, the 3 men were held on remand at Belmarsh Prison, a high security jail, the place where they detained Julian Assange for so long. So again, just what the fuck was going on? It took them more or less a year for the authorities to bring the 3 men to trial. And of course, during that time, there was hardly any coverage of a matter that potentially was as scandalous as the Profumo affair that brought down the Tory government in the 1960s. I mean, the answer as to why there was no coverage of it was probably due to the fact that there would have been a D notice issued to all the media outlets telling them that in the interests of national security there was to be no reporting on this strange and curious tale. It's interesting to note also, I was brought up in a time when scandals like this would have been all over the so-called red top newspapers. Journalists who may have been called news hounds would have been sniffing out the trail, seeking answers to the questions that I asked just a few minutes ago. The who, what, where, when and how of the situation. Those questions form the first part of the trivium, which of course is the grammar, where you are finding out the information, you're gathering the data, you're sifting through it, and you are answering those questions. The second part of the trivium is logic, where you begin to reason through the information in order to determine the how and the why of the subject matter. And in this case, this trial at the Old Bailey, the prosecuting barrister at the very beginning instructed the jury that they should not concern themselves with the why and the wherefore of the rather tawdry crime. And the judge was in support of this, instructing them to say that they were not here to determine the why. They were not here to question any of it. They were simply there in order to come to a decision as to the guilt or innocence of the three men. But the problem with that, of course, is that it goes against the way our intelligence works, our critical thinking works. The first part being, if we look at the trivium, the first part is grammar, as I said before, the who, what, when and where of the situation. The second part is the logic, where you reason it through in order to reach a conclusion that explains why. What was the motive behind this attack in this case? And then the third part is the rhetoric, which is the way in which it is expressed. A cartoonist will express it in a visual form. A reporter will express it in a news article. A critical thinker will express it maybe in the form that I'm presenting to you today and in the accompanying essay. Well, I hope so anyway, because that is my intention. It's always my intention to shine the light of my critical thinking into those shadowy recesses where others, for whatever reason, do not wish us to go. Now, throughout this, it was being reported, as I say, not by the mainstream media, which is rigged anyway, due to the fact that they're all limited as to what they can state because of these D notices that get issued, but by predominantly, as far as I could see, predominantly by a man called Tristan Flintoff. And he went in every day throughout the trial and delivered a little précis on his X feed so people could just keep up with it. But you could tell, by the time he came to the final bulletin, his head had been flipped, his brain had been rinsed, like going through a washing cycle, a washing machine cycle. And even in the comments below the video clip, you had a similar comment from the defending barrister, who also had clearly had seemed to be rather spun out by everything that had happened in the court during the previous 2 or 3 weeks, however long it was. The verdict was that the two of the defendants were guilty and the third was found innocent. Throughout, the narrative that was presented to the jury was just full of holes, a bit like a string vest. One of these holes involved invariably, you see, you go into something like this, you can't avoid asking the question of, well, why did this happen? What was the motivation? And the official narrative was simply to get the media the jury to believe that the motivation was solely that of money. Indeed, the defendants claimed that the whole thing had been financed by an individual with a Russian-sounding accent who called himself L Money. L Money. Do we deserve better psyops than this? I find it, the fact it's risible, isn't it? It's hilarious and yet tragic at the same time. So L Money, it was claimed, had funded them. But when you looked into the figures being quoted, I think the most that was ever paid via crypto or via a bank transfer was £4,000. Who in the right mind would be prepared to go out and firebomb someone's property, including 2 houses and a car, for just a few grand, for £4,000, as was quoted in this matter? And again, why? Why would this individual known as Al Money go to such great lengths to set up an attack on the Prime Minister's former properties? Again, a question that's entirely reasonable, and it's reason that is at the heart of things right now. The opposite of reason is unreason, or if something is reasonable, you could say the opposite to that is unreasonable. And so it's not really controversial for me to say that I find the whole thing remarkably unreasonable. On another point, these are the times we're living in right now. As the accompanying AI-generated image hopefully demonstrates, we are living through an apocalypse. We are living through and in an apocalypse, a great unveiling, and what comes with that is a shift in people's consciousness. It's unavoidable and undeniable, I would say. But of course, the opposite to that, the opposite to the apocalypse, the opposite to the unveiling, is the continued cover-up or cover-ups that are attempted by those who are seeking to protect their own kind. And the courts, the judges, barristers and the solicitors will go to great lengths, sometimes involving acts of supreme cognitive dissonance, in order to do that. Cognitive dissonance, that is when you can't understand what you're being presented with, that your brain cannot compute it, it cannot resolve the questions, it cannot equate the narrative with the truth, because there are glaring omissions and contradictions within it. The opposite of cognitive dissonance is cognitive resonance. And when you hear the truth, it resonates with you. And there's a sense, you can feel it in your body too, when someone's speaking the truth, because the resonance is not just cognitive, it's also a resonance that goes through your heart, through your intuition, sometimes through your stomach. You feel it in your gut, quite literally, when someone's lying to you, just as you can feel it when someone's speaking the truth. The whole proceedings were characterised by this cognitive dissonance, by this lack of resonance between the facts of the matter and the stories that were being told and or acted out in the court. And we shouldn't be surprised at this. Personally, I know exactly what it's like. Back in 2015, they helicoptered in a Knight of the Realm in order to set aside my perfectly valid negligence claim against the conveyancing solicitor who got me into what was demonstrably a void mortgage. That man was called Sir Ross Cranston, and he was the former Solicitor General in Tony Blair's government from 1997 to 2001. So he would have been one of the legal so-called experts who was behind the promotion of the false notion that the war with Iraq and the subsequent invasion was legal. And at the time, I was staggered. I mean, he said that whilst he acknowledged the veracity and validity of my claim, he said, well, what would happen, Mr. Kay, if we allowed this to go through? What do you think would happen? The entire system would collapse. By which he means the entire financial system. And to which I responded, yeah, so what? Bring it on. So in that regard, he was there not only to protect the system, but also to protect one of his own, namely my friend Ed, the conveyancing solicitor, who had advised me that everything was correct and above board, when in fact the opposite of that was the case. You know, some people will take the view that, well, they haven't answered the questions, and it doesn't prove anything one way or another. Why would it be that why did he have to deploy 3 rent boys to carry out this? Why not just 3 professional criminals? And of course, from that, people speculate as to whether Sir Keir Starmer is indeed a homosexual who is in a lavender marriage with his Jewish wife. But whichever way you look at it, Keir Starmer is an inveterate liar. And as the image suggests, he's got a lot of shit to cover up. And it must be very difficult at this point, in the middle of an apocalypse, to cover anything up, because the apocalypse is the great unveiling. So it's a fool's errand. To try and hide something right now, to try and cover something up, is absolutely crazy, because it won't be long before it's exposed and revealed, before it's unveiled. I mean, there was another story this week which illustrates the point perfectly, and that was regarding this so-called tanker issue. The narrative would have us believe that a Russian tanker had strayed into British waters, namely in the English Channel, and was there illegally. And in support of that, they put out a film which showed a special force invading the tanker and seizing control of it. But within minutes, the falsity of that was pointed out to all of those who were paying attention. For it was exactly like the moon landing of 1969. There was somebody already on board filming it, just as there was a cameraman already on the moon when the Apollo spacecraft landed on the surface of the moon. Absolutely preposterous. And apparently you can even hear in the background directors issuing instructions to the film crew. So then, and subsequent to that, it was reported that the tanker had been deregistered, and there was in fact no Russian crew nor cargo on it. So it was an entirely fictional film that was put out there. It wasn't an actual example of a documentary or some kind of verifiable reportage. And you may well say, well, fucking hell, that is extraordinary. But we are living in extraordinary times, and it's all extraordinary because we are in, clearly, and there's no shadow of a doubt to me, we are clearly in an apocalypse. So if you're a wrong-un and you're seeking to hide things, you're seeking to put out a false narrative, you're engaging in a fool's errand, to put it mildly, because it won't be long before all is revealed. And of course, it'll come as no surprise for me to state that the BBC is amongst the first of these lying media conglomerations to pump out the bullshit. First of all, in regard to the outcome of the trial at the Old Bailey involving the three arsonists, the BBC immediately jumped in and spewed out a hit piece, a blatant piece of propaganda, of anti-Russian propaganda at that, stating that the entirety of the attack, the arson against Starmer's property, was a Russian operation. The lack of depth, the lack of intellectual rigour, and of course the complete paucity of critical thinking that's displayed by these lickspittles at the BBC beggars belief. But hey ho, there it is, and that's how it manifests. And of course the BBC also went balls deep into pumping out the fake story about the seizure of the tankard, not a tankard, the oil tanker. You see, I've always got, at some point, never too far from my conscious thinking, is the prospect of a fine English ale. Because traditionally a tankard is the vessel in which you would drink your beer. But it's hilarious to me because, as I say, we're in a fucking apocalypse, and these zombie journalists, lickspittles and consummate liars have no knowledge of that. They've no true understanding of it. Nothing at all. And of course Starmer's the same, just as Trump is the same. It's not a good time to be lying. It's not a good time to be trying to hide things. And if you do, don't be surprised if it comes out and bites you on the arse, as is the case here. It's also indicative of the times that the attempts by the aforementioned Prime Minister and his criminal government to add further restrictions on social media platforms like X, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube and the rest is receiving an awful lot of pushback. Just to recap, in case you haven't seen it, Starmer's announced this week that they're going to seek to bring in measures that have to be applied within 3 months by the big tech companies of which Apple and Google are the two largest, to add some software to their devices that essentially detect when an image on a mobile device is showing something, an image of someone that is nude, and that this is to protect the under 16s. But what comes with that is an age verification stipulation, whereby you have to sign in using ID to prove that you're over 16. So people quite rightly are pointing out this is digital ID by the back door. And I was thinking about it, and I have to say, would I be bothered if I couldn't access those platforms because I refused to take part in this attempt to impose a digital gulag on everyone via a digital ID system and of course the accompanying digital currency? Would I be bothered? No, I wouldn't give a flying fuck, because essentially all I would need to do was just publish my works, my writings and discourses on my site, roguemail.org, and or at Substack, and they could get to fuck, the rest, all of them. No interest in it whatsoever. However, people need to realise just exactly what the name of the game is. Starmer is not the one who's imposing this, he is just the actor. He is the LARPer, the live action role player, who is seeking to impose it for and on behalf of his dark overlords. And so we go through this pantomime where Starmer is depicted as the villain of the piece, and Mr. Elon Musk is falsely presented as the hero, because he makes a statement about how we've got to resist this censorship and how wrong Starmer is in seeking to impose it. He is wrong, there's no doubt about it. But all the while, at the back of the mind, you've got to remember that X, formerly known as Twitter, is a platform that is deeply embedded in censorship. Its principal dictate is freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. And I'm talking from personal experience here. My account has been suppressed on the simple basis that I am critiquing the financial system and the Talmudicunt's overreach regarding all matters of a political, geopolitical, global, moral and information variety, all of it, in other words. When I say information, I'm talking about films, videos, the print media, both newspapers, the journals, and the book publishing companies, all of which are owned by these judicial, there's a clue for you, by these Judaical controllers. And X is no different from that. The algorithms are such in X that it will immediately detects if you're posting stuff that contains those trigger words that it can use then to mark you falsely as an anti-Zionist, as a anti-Semite. At which point I'm reminded of the expression, if my auntie had balls, she'd be my uncle. And it is a load of balls, isn't it? So that's the game, that's the psyop that's taking place. Musk condemned Starmer's attempt to impose this draconian ban. And all the while, Musk is promoting the X platform as a all-encompassing, one-stop system of currency, information, of being a marketplace for selling and buying. A one-stop, gargantuan marketplace, which of course you have to be verified to go on. And also, it's plain to state that Musk is a military, deep state military contractor, just like Peter Thiel is. Peter Thiel of Palantir, who have been awarded these billion-plus contracts with the UK government, and they were operating through the likes of Tony Blair's son, Ewan Blair. These are the dark overlords, and Peter Thiel, whatever he may claim to the contrary, is a vampire. Why do I say that? Because he has blood transfusions of young people's blood. He drinks blood. If you drink blood, you're a fucking vampire. We don't need to say any more on that subject, other than the fact that, you know, it's a very gross and materialistic way of living your life, because you clearly have not grasped that life is actually a spiritual journey. It's not a journey of avarice and materialism. You're not here to fuck up other people's lives, to acquire as many yachts, houses and as much land as you possibly can and all the rest of it. You're not even here to fuck as many women as you can, Elon. And I'm saying that as somebody who was once a Lothario and did in fact play the field, so to speak. Not something I'm proud of, I'm just stating it as a fact. But it does help me to have an insight into exactly what the modus operandi is of these individuals. It's all a bit fucked really, isn't it? Because they're all a bit fucked. They've all got screws loose and they are all operating beyond reason. So that's the puppet play that's going on. That is the act that's being played out by these LARPers, these live action role players. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? As Shakespeare said, whoever Shakespeare was, all the world is a stage and we are but actors strutting and fretting our stuff across the stage. But the analogy goes further than that. The metaphor goes deeper, because we can ask, well, who is writing the scripts? What is going on behind the curtain? What is the effect of all of this on the intended audience? It's unavoidable. You're an actor. I've written an article this week about LARPing around, this live action role playing, which is a term that comes from the 1990s and is largely concerned with the playing of games in which you have to act out the roles of certain characters. Games like Dungeons and Dragons. It's unavoidable. That's the nature of where we are at. Even now, I'm walking through these woods with a camera on the end of a stick, talking to you, or having a conversation with you. I'm acting as though I'm having a conversation with you. Some people may say I'm talking to the audience. Well, whichever way you look at it, I'm LARPing, aren't I? I'm playing a role. It's unavoidable. You get out of bed, you're playing a role. Every time you do something, you are acting in the strictest sense of the term. So that is the nature of the realm. It's just a case of how well are you playing your role, and are you your own scriptwriter, or are you acting out a role that the controllers, the directors and producers of this whole shit show want you to play? It's an interesting question. I've got a confession. This is the second attempt to record this. So if you see me occasionally checking the microphone, it's because yesterday I recorded some 20 minutes and the microphone was on mute. Anyway, I suppose that was a dress rehearsal for the latest act as we go through Ambergate Woods. I was rehearsing, as it were, in the woods near Mapley Reservoir, close to Wilkeston. I was rehearsing my part, the part which I am acting out right now. It's all very paradoxical, you know, especially in a time like this where that which was hidden is now revealed. That which one has attempted to hide will shortly be revealed. And it seems to be increasingly that it's revealed within a short space of time. Mark Twain famously said something along the lines of, "A lie can be halfway round the world, whilst the truth is still lacing up its boots." But Mark Twain was not living in an apocalypse as we are witnessing right now. And I think what we're looking at is a situation where just to extend the metaphor, before the lie can escape from the room, the truth has got its running shoes on and is in active pursuit. In other words, the lie's not going to get very far. It's certainly not going to get all the way around the world. And if it does, it will be exposed. sooner rather than later. It's now later than when I started, and I'm going to wind things up at this point. But here's an interesting thing. By the time you get to watch this, it should be on Sunday. Well, it'll be Sunday for... By the time you get to watch this, which should be Sunday for everybody, Saturday for all my very kind subscribers, paid subscribers, it'll be on a stealth camp. One of the joyful tangents I've been on during the course of this afternoon's ramble is to find myself a suitable little campsite where I want to try out my new lightweight, super stealthy tent this coming weekend, weather permitting. In fact, fuck the weather, I'm going to do it anyway. So by the time you watch this, I may well be ensconced rather stealthily in a place not too far from where I am now, a stealth camp. It's going to be a stealth woodland camp, and I will doubtless make some kind of footage whilst I'm LARPing it out. So I'm going to be LARPing the role of a stealth woodland camper within the next 48 hours. And that, I suppose, is the point of today's broadcast. We are all but actors, we are all but LARPers, and the whole world is a stage. So why not act the fool? Why not act the hero? Why not act whichever role you wish to play? Unscripted, or at least in the direction of your own script, of your own imagination. Anyway, should you be feeling appreciative, please chuck a few quid into the Buy Me a Coffee pot, which is linked below. If you're watching it on YouTube, please like, share, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe. And if you haven't subscribed to my weekly bulletin, the Rogue Bulletin, via my website, roguemail.org, then please do so, because you're missing out on a treat, namely my weekly bulletin, which will land in your inbox on a Sunday morning. A splendid accompaniment to a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever it is you prefer to partake of on a Sunday morning. I am also on Substack, so if you want to catch me there, feel free to do so. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all those recent subscribers. For some reason, I seem to have had a bit of a surge in numbers over the last few weeks, and I have to say I'm very pleased with that. Fantastic. I don't pretend that everybody understands what I'm going on about, or indeed shares my perspective on things. So, whoever you are, wherever you might be, I wish you a splendid day, and, as ever, I'll catch you on the flip side.